All right, so we want to spend some time talking about our 34th president, a guy by the name of Dwight Eisenhower. Eisenhower is going to be really important in this post war period that we're taking a look at. He's president from 1952 to 1960, so he's kind of the bridge between Truman and then the Kennedy era that we'll see when we start talking about the era of the 60s. Now, Eisenhower was a famous name. You probably remember him from our World War II unit. He was the Supreme Allied Commander in Europe. And so that means everybody that was an ally in Europe, he's kind of the guy pulling the strings. He's in charge of managing all those egos, guys like Patton and Montgomery, making sure that everybody's in the right place and really trying to defeat the Germans and the Italians. Does a really good job of that. You probably remember this guy. He's the planner of Operation Overlord, which was the D-Day invasion. And so he meets with a lot of success. Now, this was not something that was completely unexpected. Ike had been a military man his entire life. He'd gone to the military academy and had been a soldier for all of his working career. He's not a soldier in the way we think of. He didn't command troops in combat. Probably would have liked to. A lot of these guys saw that as a way to distinction and honor. But very early on, it becomes clear that he's really, really good at logistics, at taking these big, almost seemingly impossible tasks and getting them done. And so that's always the kind of jobs that he's doing. Even when World War I rolls around, he's in charge of getting the troops ready to go overseas. And by the time he gets to the point where he can go himself, the war's over with. When World War II rolls around, they need somebody to be over there managing these egos and really millions and millions of people, lots of equipment, and understanding they all need to be kind of put to a common purpose. Ike's going to be the guy that does that. Does his job very well, and once the war's over with, he will become the military governor of Germany. Germany after World War II, we're going to see in another one of these little videos, doesn't um, doesn't really get to be Germany anymore. Even when I was growing up, Germany was two different countries. There was a West Germany and an East Germany, and part of that's going to come from this post-war period where they're going to say, "Hey, basically, you caused two of these World War things. We're not doing it again. We're going to change the way that you kind of do business in this part of the world." The interesting thing is, Ike is going to be asked to run for president. Harry Truman actually, story goes, offered in 1948 not to run for president again if Eisenhower wanted to. Eisenhower didn't want that. Eisenhower's going to take some time off. He retires from the military. He actually goes and becomes the president of a college and just wants to back out of public life. But people just keep talking to him about how good they think he would be in politics, what a good leader he might be during this period. And so he, in 1952, will decide to run for president. The interesting thing is, both political parties ask him to run for president. So he could have been the Democratic nominee or he could have been the Republican nominee. He decides he's got more in common with the Republicans, so he runs as a Republican, but if both parties are asking you to run, chances are pretty good you're going to win. His slogan, "I like Ike." Ike was a nickname for Eisenhower. And so there's a cool little commercial I'll put up on the playlist for you that was, he's kind of the first president that's going to use television and television advertising in his campaign. So there's a whole little song, "I like Ike." So 1952, he's going to pledge to do a couple things. One is to end the war in Korea. He promises to go to Korea and negotiate peace. And that's really the big thing. Now, the interesting thing is he was really good at like the war and the foreign policy stuff because he'd been involved in that in his whole life. The domestic stuff is where he was lacking a bit. He hadn't lived in the United States all that much, right? He'd been on military bases all around the world. Matter of fact, he doesn't own his first house in the United States until he's done being president. And so he doesn't have, so he's got to pick somebody that's kind of different than him to be his vice president. So he picks a guy, a young senator from the state of California, named Richard Nixon. Now, obviously, Richard Nixon will become president later in United States history, but he picks Nixon because Nixon's very young, knows a lot about domestic policy, and he's got a reputation of being very hard on communism. And so it's kind of taking those areas where Ike may be a little weaker, and that's showing those are showing up as strengths for Nixon. So it's called balancing the ticket when they try and decide how they're going to do that. So he is, like I said, has extremely strong administrative skills. So it looks like, man, this is going to be the guy to handle some of these complex tasks of kind of the Cold War in this post World War II era. Like I said, he's already got a lot of friends and alliances around the world because of the job he did during World War II. Just doesn't have as much with the domestic issues, right? The stuff that's going on here in the United States. Ike kind of gets a reputation for not being a very hands-on president. And I think probably that, kind of like George Washington, is a little bit of his brilliance in the job, in that he knew how to make it look like he wasn't the one maybe doing some unpopular things. Kind of came off as everybody's grandpa. Liked to wear sweaters, golfed a lot as president, and just almost cultivated this image that he's a little bit detached from what's going on. But that also absolves you of some of the blame. And when you talk to people who worked with him in the Eisenhower administration, he was very involved, but was a good delegator of responsibility, knew about people. So let's look at some of his achievements. He does go and end the Korean War. They signed an armistice with that country in 1953. He appoints the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, a guy named Earl Warren, who will preside over the Brown versus Board of Education decision, which desegregates schools. So an awful lot of his administration is going to see some of the early civil rights unrest in the South. But the Little Rock Nine are admitted to Little Rock High School while he is president. He sends the National Guard down to escort those kids into Little Rock High School and desegregates that. This is the guy that presides over the creation of the interstate highway system. So I know what you're thinking. Yes, this is the guy that kills Radiator Springs of Cars fame, but don't hold that against him too much. He probably didn't know what he was doing to Flo and Luigi and all of those guys. But we hopping on the interstates and moving quickly across the country. You got to thank Eisenhower for that. The Soviets will launch Sputnik into space, kind of kicking off the space race during his administration. And Eisenhower, in response, will create NASA. And so we owe the creation of NASA to him. There are also some other things. We're going to talk about the Cuban Missile Crisis when we talk about the 1960s that are a little bit of a rough spot for him. But he's constantly kind of wrangling with the Soviet Union for world domination. In 1960, right before he's done being president, there's actually one of our spy planes that gets shot down over the Soviet Union. Now, we both spied on each other all the time. That was a really poorly kept secret. But when this guy crashes, they're just demanding Eisenhower apologize. And he basically just says, no, we're not apologizing to you guys. You do the same thing to us. We feel like we have a responsibility to keep an eye on you. And so I'm not going to apologize for what had happened. Ike actually has a heart attack while he's president of the United States, but recovers. Like I said, ends up serving 2 terms and then retiring. He buys that first house in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania. If you ever get a chance to go to Gettysburg, it's an awesome place to visit. But one of the things you can do is the National Park Service owns Eisenhower's house now. And so you can actually take a bus out there and see Eisenhower's house. Well worth doing. It's neat to see kind of what his post-presidency life looked like. Do not drive out there yourself. There are posted signs, and they do get mad when you try to drive out there yourself. Not that I would know, but just trust me, they get mad.